So, not too long ago, actor and musician Jack Black released a video of himself touring the Pinball Hall of Fame museum in Las Vegas.
Somebody once told me the bread alive and baby, you ain't the sharpest tool in the shed.
This museum is a project of the Las Vegas Pinball Collectors Club, and it features pinball machines from all eras, amounting to over 200 different pinball games, including some classic video arcade games and other novelty machines of the past and present. This got me thinking about the history of the pinball. The origins of pinball are intertwined with the history of many other ball-based games that were usually played outside. These games can include games like croquet, golf, and hockey. The evolution of those games played outdoors led to indoor games played on tables, such as billiards, bowling, shuffleboard, but none looked as close as a game known as bagatelle. A game with the objective of getting a number of balls past wooden pins into holes that are guarded by wooden pegs, which were later fixed to the board. Then, in 1871, British inventor Montague Redgrave, while manufacturing bagatelle tables in Cincinnati, invented and mounted the spring launcher, also known as a plunger. Now the player can shoot balls up this inclined playfield toward the scoring targets using this device, which remains in use in pinball machines to this day. As time went on, the game also shrank in size to fit atop a bar or counter. The balls became marbles and the wickets became small metal pins, hence the name. Redgrave's popularization of the spring launcher and innovations in game design are acknowledged as the birth of pinball in its modern form. You could see Jack Black playing one of these games in his "We're Finally Gaming" video, so take a look. By the 1930s, manufacturers were producing coin-operated versions of bagatelles, now known as marble games or pin games. The table was under glass and used Redgrave's plunger device to propel the ball into the upper playfield. 1931 introduced the first coin-operated pinball games, selling between 5 and 7 balls for a single penny. The game resonated with people wanting cheap entertainment in the Great Depression era's economy, and you would find that most drugstores and taverns in the United States would operate these machines. Additionally, the 1930s saw major advances in pinball design with the introduction of electrification. Electric lights soon became a standard feature of all subsequent pinball games, designed to attract players. By the end of 1932, there were approximately 150 companies manufacturing pinball machines, most of them in Chicago, Illinois. Chicago was the center of the pinball manufacturing business ever since. Competition among companies was incredibly strong, however, and by 1934, there were only 14 companies remaining. During World War II, all of the major manufacturers of coin-operated games were adapted to manufacture equipment for the war effort. Some companies bought old games from operators and refurbished them, adding new artwork with a patriotic theme. At the end of the war, a generation of Americans looked for amusement in bars and malt shops, and the pinball saw another golden age. Improvements such as the tilt mechanism and free games, known as replays, appeared. Now let's skip to 1947. The Gottlieb Company produced a game called Humpty Dumpty, the first game to add player-controlled flippers to keep the ball in play longer. Before, the lack of flippers made the game completely subject to chance. Therefore, adding a much-needed skill factor truly made it into a game instead of just a spectacle. The low-power flippers required 3 pairs around the playfield to get the ball to the top. It's actually quite amusing. Take a look at how it's played. The next innovative pinball game to come out was Triple Action. Triple Action was the first game to feature just 2 flippers at the bottom of the playfield. These flippers were made more powerful by the addition of a direct current power supply. The post-war era was dominated by the Gottlieb Company. Game designers Wayne Nyens and Ed Krinsky, along with artist Leroy Parker, produced games that collectors consider some of the best classic pinball machines to date. Let's now skip ahead to the 1970s, where the introduction of microprocessors brought pinball into the realm of electronic gaming. The electromechanical relays and scoring reels that drove games in the 1950s and the 1960s were replaced in the 1970s with circuit boards and digital displays. The first solid-state pinball machine is believed to be Microgame's The Spirit of 76, though the first mainstream solid-state game was Williams' Hot Tip in 1977. This new technology led to a boom for the Williams and Bally Company, who attracted more players with games featuring more complex rules, digital sound effects, and even speech. The game boom of the 1980s signaled the end for the boom for pinball. Arcades replaced rows of pinball machines with video games like 1978's Space Invaders, 1979's Asteroids, and 1980's Pac-Man, as well as 1981's Galaga. These games earned significantly greater profits than the pinball machines of the day, while simultaneously requiring less maintenance. Bally, Williams, and Gottlieb continued to make pinball machines, while they also manufactured video games in much higher numbers. Many of the larger companies were acquired by or merged with other companies. While the video game craze of the late 1970s and the early 1980s dealt a severe blow to pinball revenue, it did spark the creative talents within the industry. All companies involved tried to take advantage of the new solid-state technology to improve player appeal of pinball and win back former players from video games. Some of this creativity resulted in landmark designs and features still present today. Some of these include speech, ramps for the ball to travel around, and even multiple balls. Although these novel features did not win back players as the manufacturers had hoped, they changed players' perception of pinball for the coming decades. After the collapse of the coin-operated video game industry, pinball saw another comeback in the 1990s. Some new manufacturers entered the field. These new companies were able to obtain licenses to license popular movies and icons of the time, which became a staple for pinball machines going forward. Notable licenses include Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Star Trek The Next Generation, and The Addams Family, which actually produced an all-time modern sales record of 20,270 machines. The 90s, of course, were a roller coaster of an era, and the end of the 1990s saw another downturn in the industry. By 1997, there were two companies left, Sega Pinball and Williams. But after the closure of most pinball manufacturers in the 1990s, smaller, independent manufacturers started appearing in the early 2000s, yet they never really got up to its prime like in the 70s. But the pinball machine business was still enjoying a revival, and it's the video games industry that is helping fuel it. If you owned a computer in the late 1990s, you've almost definitely played 3D Pinball for Windows Space Cadet, as it came bundled with Windows alongside Minesweeper and FreeCell. Pinball video games also typically had licenses to other products, such as 1999's Pokemon Pinball for the Game Boy Color, 1993's Kirby's Pinball Land, 1982's Baby Pac-Man, and one of my favorites, 2005's Metroid Prime Pinball for the Nintendo DS. In addition to the new video pinball games coming out, there are now games that attempt to preserve the pinball machines of old. One of the leading pinball video game developers is California-based Farsight Studios. It owes much of its success to two now-defunct pinball manufacturers, Williams and Gottlieb. Farsight's business model is based on buying up the licenses to many of those two companies' most successful pinball tables and creating highly accurate digital simulations.
And has earned among the legions of pinball fans, and for us in the art crew this means accuracy. We take literally hundreds of photographs and shots and measurements down to the minutest detail to make sure we get it right. We get schematics and original documentation and manuals, and we proceed piece by piece with care. Typically we'll start with a cabinet graphic, and then we lay into playfield. This gives us the foundation guide for the rest of the placement of the piece.
Virtual classic machines can then be played on tablets, game consoles, home computers, and even phones. And I believe this is a perfect way to bring pinball to new audiences and preserve pinball culture for years to come. So, what do you guys think? Personally, I was a huge fan of Pokemon Pinball back in 1999. However, Metroid Prime Pinball is still #1 in my heart. What are some of your favorite pinball machines or video games? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification icon so that you can see weekly videos just like this one. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for having me back. It's been a while, huh?